We're real excited about this year's keynote speaker. I know I am. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a patriotic sap. I cry during the national anthem, so I'm excited to hear from Colonel Gregory D. Gadson, retired. He's a Chesapeake, Virginia native. He's been in the United States Army for 26 years. He's retired as the commander, the garrison commander of Fort Belvoir, 50,000 military personnel and civilians at that post. His 25-year career as an Army officer included his own challenge. Deployed May 2007, commander of the 2nd Battalion, 32nd Field Artillery. An attack by an IED cost him both legs, above the knees, and normal use of his right arm and hand. Despite that, he stayed in the Army, active duty. He refused to be defined by those wounds and those injuries, and in that way, a victory. He drew upon his lessons of pride, poise, and team, learned as a West Point linebacker. Go Army, beat Navy. I know he'll agree with me there. Second Lieutenant, Field Artillery, graduated in 1989 from West Point. And check this out. He has the ribbons, I'm sure, to show his work at Operation Desert Shield and Storm, both in Kuwait, Operation Joint Forge in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, and of course, Operation Iraqi Freedom. He has worked tirelessly with wounded warriors and other disabled, not just in the Army, not just veterans, but throughout. And he has testified before Congress. And you got to think they're listening when a guy like Colonel Gadson shows up. Here's a fun little story, though, that I really got a kick out of. We have any New York Giants fans here? Yeah, okay. Well, you might know this story. In 2007, the Giants were struggling. And that was the year that Tom Coughlin reached out to Colonel Gadson and said, hey, my team needs a little help. So he had a chance to speak to the team, and on a couple of occasions during the season, help motivate them and get them going in the right direction. And then I learned today he had a chance to speak to the team the night before that Super Bowl 42. The Giants, surprised to be there after the way things were going, against the undefeated New England Patriots. Any Patriots fans here? I didn't think so. Well, we know that outcome. The Giants pulled it off, won the world championship, and I think, Colonel Gadson, does that get you in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, at least as far as, maybe the Giants Hall of Fame, at least, right? He still does some mentoring with the team. So we're going to see if we can make him a Chiefs fan while he's here, all right? Maybe we can get him out to the practice facility for today's workouts and fire them up. Please welcome, we're excited and very honored to have Colonel Greg Gadson.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for inviting me here to be here for such really an important event for your community. Every one of you here has shown in some way, if not through your resources, through your efforts, that everyone in our community deserves dignity and respect, and that includes those with disabilities. Before I begin, please allow me to acknowledge my faith in my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I know without his grace and mercy, I would not be here today. Now, this is a special treat for me because most of you, as John was going through my introduction, he said I was a native of Chesapeake, Virginia, and that's where I call home, but I really got some Kansas City, Missouri connections. The first one, probably the most important to me, the most important to me, I don't say probably, the most important to me is my wife and my bride of 27 years. She was born in Kansas City and raised in Lee Summit, and she was my West Point classmate, and so that's where we met, and we've been married since. And one of the things while we were dating, I happened to notice that Missouri did not tax her military paycheck, and so I actually changed my state of residence to Missouri from Virginia, because Virginia was taxing the you-know-what out of me. So You know, I might be dumb, but I'm not stupid. So, but a second connection, it's in a roundabout way, it's a more recent connection, and so there's really, and this is really tied to the Kansas City Chiefs, and so, you know, I'm going to root for the Kansas City Chiefs, except that they're in the Super Bowl against the Giants. So I'll make that caveat. But my football coach, a gentleman named Bob Sutton, who is the defensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs, was the defensive coordinator for the Army football team for all 4 years that I played there. So I played for Bob Sutton for 4 years, and he's a great man. And I had a chance to catch up with him last night. He took me to Jack Stack Barbecue, so I got my fill of barbecue. So again, it's really, I just want to let you all know that I really have felt in some way part of the Kansas City community for really all of my adult life. And I don't like the Jayhawks. No, I'm just kidding. So, just kidding. Lastly, let me congratulate, or let me recognize first all the sponsors. Again, you all have really shown leadership in your community, and you don't get a lot of recognition for it. And I think it's truly because of your understanding that all people deserve dignity and respect. I'd also like to recognize and again congratulate the award winners. And the final group for me, a personal group, is really those who have worn the uniform. I know there's quite a few out here, but also your family members. Some of you grew up as military brats, and you all in our nation don't deserve the recognition and credit that you don't get the recognition and credit you deserve, because it really is a whole family that serves, and I want to thank you, so let me recognize all of you. So I like to pick up this stage of my life, the beginning stage that brought me into the disability and brought me into the disability community. I just returned from a 1-year deployment in Afghanistan. I was stationed at the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii, and I was this strapping, handsome lieutenant colonel, 41 years old. I just got promoted literally to lieutenant colonel, and I'd been selected to command a battalion. The Army had promised me they were going to leave me in Hawaii for 6 months before they moved me to my next location, since I just got back from Afghanistan. So I decided to take a vacation on the Big Island of Hawaii. I'm at the beach, I'm working on my suntan. I get this call. It's a 2-star general on the other line, and he's congratulating me and welcome back, and says, "So Greg, you're going to be commanding a battalion at Fort Riley, Kansas." And my heart just sunk, and I'm like, "When do I got to be there?" And he's like, "Now." And it really sunk. So I'm like, I just left Afghanistan. I'm thinking, why don't you just send me back there? Because there's really not much difference between Kansas and... So I know there's some parts of the room that are not going to like me after that. Yeah. But so literally in August of 2005, I reported to Fort Riley, Kansas. In most cases, you get to, when you take command of a military unit, you're taken over from someone. But in this case, this unit didn't exist. The Army was literally having to expand to meet the requirements of fighting wars in 2 theaters, in Iraq and Afghanistan specifically. And so I was literally the 4th person to report to my unit, and I was going to be responsible for manning, equipping, and training it. And I knew right away that I couldn't blame the person before me. If we would turn out to be a bad outfit, I didn't need to look any further than myself. And so I relied on my earliest days as a cadet football player, where I was fortunate to play for Coach Jim Young. And he, during his 9-year tenure, winning tenure, we beat Navy, 3 out of 4 times I was there. It was built around the ideals of pride, poise, and team. Real quickly, pride was just really about self-accountability. I recognized that if we were going to have unit pride, that we had to have individual pride, and we had to instill that in every individual. Ultimately, what I would remind everyone is you're the only one that knows whether or not you're living up to the best you can be. I mean, I might be your boss, your supervisors might look at you and make some evaluation, but you're the only one that truly knows whether or not you did the best you can be. And that's what we expect from everyone. That's what we have to demand from each other. Poise. Obviously in my line of work, you think of poise as being calm in difficult situations, and that is a great part of it. But poise was more than that. Poise was about character. We wanted to be an organization that did things the right way all the time, not because someone was looking over my shoulder or our shoulders, but because that's what we needed to be. Because I tell you, in difficult times, if you're an outfit or if you're a person that takes shortcuts in your life, when things become difficult, that's the character you're going to have. But if you're an outfit, if you're a person that or an organization that does things the right way, when things become difficult, you're going to continue to do them the right way. And then team. That's individuals. That's an organization that comes to work understanding that the greater good is that when they're all putting in for themselves, when they're all putting in for the team, that you can create a greater outcome, you can create greater synergy, recognizing that you can do that. Well, in a little over a year, we had grown to full strength, nearly 400. And in November of 2006, the Army decided that we were going to deploy to Iraq. And in January of 2007, when President Bush announced the surge, they actually moved up our deployment. We were actually the second of 5 brigades that would go to Iraq to try to get the security situation under control. By March of 2007, my battalion, 2nd Battalion, 32nd Field Artillery, assumed our battle space in Baghdad, an area in Baghdad along with 2 Iraqi battalions that had between 70 and 90,000 Iraqi citizens. And our mission was clear and it was simple, is get the violence under control. As you can imagine, there were many difficult days for us in those early months of 2007, but none more difficult for me than on the night of May 7th of 2007. I remember it like it was yesterday because I was returning for a memorial service for 2 service members who had been killed from a sister battalion in my brigade at Fort Riley. And as I was heading back to my headquarters in a convoy, my heart was heavy. I mean, I found myself honestly questioning whether or not how their families would feel about this sacrifice, and recognizing that those young men had paid in full measure, and they would never recognize and realize the dreams that they had when my vehicle was hit by a roadside bomb or improvised explosive device. The roadside bomb lifted my 15,000-pound vehicle off the ground and ejected me out of it on a road very similar to I-70. I remember hitting the ground and coming to a rolling stop on my back, and recognizing that this was pretty serious. I didn't know or understand the extent of my injuries, but I do know that I remember asking God not to die here, and I lost consciousness. When my vehicle came to a stop, it was nearly 100 meters or so, a football field away from where I was lying on the side of the road. I was fortunate that First Sergeant Frederick Johnson who was the senior non-commissioned officer in my vehicle, was the first to recognize that I was missing. He began to scan the Baghdad darkness, and he found me already unconscious and lying in a pool of my blood. And he began to resuscitate me. And a young 19-year-old private, Eric Brown, would put the tourniquets on my legs, a fact that the doctors say saved my life. Now, at this point, I was just the passenger. There's nothing heroic about what I did in surviving. But just to give you an extent or appreciation of my injuries, in the first 4 hours after I was wounded, I went through nearly 130 pints of blood. The average human holds between 6 and 8 pints. So just to give you a perspective. On the 8th of May, they moved me from Baghdad to Balad. On the 9th of May, they evacuated me to Landstuhl, Germany, in each location having surgery. And on the 11th of May, I arrived at Walter Reed Army Medical Hospital in Washington, D.C., still with my legs, but obviously very badly damaged, intubated and on a feeding tube in the ICU. On the 18th of May, the blood vessels in my left leg could no longer sustain blood flow, and I literally started bleeding to death in the ICU. Once again, a nurse literally took off her belt and put on my legs to make a field expedient tourniquet, and they took me into surgery and amputated my left leg above the knee to save my life. The next day, the same thing happened to my right leg, but the doctors were able to pull a vein from my left bicep and put in my right leg. And they were able to save my right leg. By this time, I was able to kind of process what was going on. I wasn't, obviously I wasn't smiling a lot, but I was able to hold conversations with the doctors about whether or not I should keep my right leg or not. And ultimately, I made the decision to amputate my right leg. I felt that my quality of life would be better with 2 prosthetics or in a wheelchair than having a leg that was never going to work again and one missing. So on the 24th of May, the doctors amputated my right leg above the knee. During that time period, I had been complaining about my right arm. Literally my legs were like a 4-alarm fire. And they decided to re-x-ray it. And the results of the x-rays were actually that my right arm and radial head of my elbow were broken as well and would require surgery. And about a week after my right leg was amputated, they operated on my right arm. They had to put a plate and screws in my upper arm and replace the radial head of my elbow. As a result of the surgery, I actually sustained radial nerve and ulnar nerve damage, which prevented me from moving my wrist. And then I experienced this condition called heterotopic ossification. Essentially, my body was producing too much calcium, and my elbow locked up. So functionally, I was down to one limb, my non-dominant left arm and hand. And needless to say, I was not very optimistic about my future. Again, literally a month before, I was a 210-pound fit officer, moving up the ranks and leading men and women. And here I was, a 148-pound man with one functional limb, with no real prospects before me. Now, during most of these surgeries and most of my hospital time, I had a tremendous safety blanket of family and friends that really softened my blow to all these things happening to me. But by the time I got released from the hospital and was settling into home in early August, as I say, the band stopped playing, and I really fell into a depression about my prospects in life. And that's when I quit. I literally quit. I shunned away my family, and I just remember balling up in a corner, essentially, and just crying for nearly 48 hours. I just did not want to live my life this way. But I mentioned, but that wasn't me. Ultimately, after just quitting, I realized that I wasn't a quitter. That wasn't my character. And you know what? I was still a father. I was still a husband. I was still a soldier. And I was still responsible for all my responsibilities. And my character wasn't that of a quitter. And so with a few expletives, I said, you know what do I got to lose? I'm 2 feet shorter. I'm going to live life, and I'm not taking any prisoners. Thank you. So in the middle of August, I was offered a chance by an adaptive reconditioning trainer at Walter Reed, a chance to go out to Vail, Colorado. And it was not just myself, but it was my family. We went out there, and I found out that I could do just about anything. I rode a horse. I did fly fishing, whitewater rafting. It really opened my eyes to the fact that I could do just about everything I used to do. I just had to do it differently. But this chance encounter really changed my life. I was in a line to get a cowboy hat, believe it or not. And I heard this voice behind me talking, and I kept listening. I'm like, man, I recognize this voice. So I finally turned around, and it happened to be a man named Coach Bill Curry, who ironically, the last time we had ever been in the same location was when Army played Alabama in the Sun Bowl in 1988, and he was the head coach of Alabama. And we started talking, and we had a conversation for hours. And at the end of the conversation, he said, young man, you have a story to tell. You have something to share with the world. Don't be afraid to share it. So that somehow stuck in the back of my head, and I went back to Washington, D.C. And as fate would have it, John alluded to it, in 2007, the Giants started out their season 0-2. And their third game of the season was against the Washington Redskins in D.C. And I had a former classmate and teammate named Mike Sullivan that was the wide receivers coach for the New York Giants. So he called me up, and he actually had visited me in the hospital, and so when the week that they were coming to town, he called me up on Monday and asked me if I still wanted to come to the game, and I said sure. And he asked me how many tickets. I said 4. So on Tuesday, he calls me back and says, hey, look, I got this idea. I want to know if you'd be willing to speak to the team. And I'm thinking, okay, is this quid pro quo or whatever, you know? So I go, sure, I'll talk to the team. And so he was really running. He wanted to make sure he was okay before he ran the idea behind to Coach Coughlin. And so Coach Coughlin called me on Friday and asked me if I'd be willing to speak to the team. And he was talking to me about all these players that I don't know. And on Saturday night before the game, I linked up with the New York Giants at their hotel, and I shared with them much of what I'm sharing with you today. And so on Sunday, we went to the stadium, and the game starts out, and the score at halftime is the Redskins 14, the Giants 3. And I'm thinking, there goes my career as a motivational speaker. But lo and behold, the Giants would rally and end up winning the game 24-17, and would go on what still stands as a record today, a 10-game road winning streak. Now, they kept trying to get me to come back to a game, and I was like, they're just being polite to a guy that lost his legs, and I just never made time to go. And they made the playoffs, and that was when I was finally able to go, and I went to their Tampa playoff game. And when I saw the look that they had on their eyes when they saw me, I knew I was a giant. I knew I had found I was now on another team, not just the team that I had left in Iraq, but I was here with the Giants. So they won that game against Tampa Bay, and then I had to go back in the hospital for some additional surgeries, and this is in January of 2008. And they wanted me to come. They actually had asked me to come to the Dallas game, but I was like, I'm not postponing my surgeries for the Dallas game. I ended up being in the hospital, so they won the Dallas game, and then they were going to play the Green Bay Packers in the NFC Championship game. I was still in the hospital. And on Wednesday before the game, Coach Coughlin called me up and asked me if I'd be the honorary captain for the game. And I said, yeah. And then I told the doctors, I said, look, you guys discharge me or I'm out of here because I'm going to Green Bay. So they actually discharged me, and I flew to Green Bay on Saturday. And this turned out to be, on Sunday, the third coldest game in NFL history. I'm like 3 days out of the hospital. I had gotten my arm and my right leg operated on, and it's 33 below zero. And I couldn't even wheel myself in my wheelchair, and my son was with me, and he wheels me out for the coin toss. And they have a nun in a wheelchair out there. I'm like, they got God on their side. So they win. So the coin toss happens, and they were going to wheel me upstairs to get me out of the cold. And I said, no, I'm staying here on the sidelines. All the games I've been to, I've been on the sidelines. I'm not going to change. And so I stayed. And so I don't know how many of you recall the game, but it went into overtime. The Green Bay Packers win the coin toss. They're driving. Brett Favre throws an interception. Corey Webster catches it, comes off the sideline, gives me the ball. Lawrence Tynes, Kansas City, kicks the winning field goal, and we're off to the Super Bowl. And so I got a chance. I went to a practice the day before the Super Bowl. I got a chance to go to my first Giants practice, and on the way back, I was sitting next to Coach Coughlin, and I asked Coach Coughlin if I could speak to the team tonight, and he said, "What are you going to say?" I'm like, "I don't know yet. I'll figure it out." But anyway, what I said to him was this. There are a lot of things that happen to us in life, and most of us don't have any control of those things. But we have control over our effort. We have control over what we give to each other. We have control over our attitude. And I'm proud to be a part of this team. And if I could be anywhere in the world right now, it would be back with my soldiers in Iraq. But I can't be back with them. But I told them that I would take every single one of them with me because they had become that kind of team. And I told them that they were going to win tomorrow. I told them that. And we beat the 18-0 Patriots in Super Bowl 42. So I've been a Giant ever since. Thank you. So as fate would have it, as luck would have it, Peter Berg is from New York, and he's a Giants fan. And while I was in the war college, going back to school, I was also petitioning the Army to stay in the Army. You know, I say, after all, you guys weren't paying me for how fast I could run anyway. And in early 2010, the Army, after finding me unfit in the medical board, actually approved and allowed me to stay in the Army. Just shortly after that, I got a call from Peter Berg, actor and director. He calls me at my house one day and he says, "I'd like you to be in my movie." And I was like, I remember I told you, I'm like, sure, why not? And that's what I literally said. But because I was in school, they kept trying to get me to go out to, they kept trying to get me out to LA to do a screen test. And, you know, I said, yeah, I would do it, but it was one of those things I said, yeah, but I was like, I never acted before. This is not gonna go anywhere. So I never went out to LA. And so Peter flies to Washington, D.C., and he asked me to meet, and this was in the spring, he asked me to meet him at Redskin Park because he was friends with Dan Snyder, the owner of the Washington Redskins, to go to meet him there. So I'm all right. And they had been sending me scripts. I'm not making this up. They'd been sending me scripts for months, and I hadn't read one. And so right before the meeting, I get on my wife had been reading them, and I asked her to go through the book and tab all the pages where my lines were and highlight them. Yeah. And so I go to Redskin Park, and I meet Peter, and we're at practice. So after practice, he goes, "Let's go up to Dan's office." So we're in Dan Snyder's office. So this is the team I first spoke against, and he's looking at me all evil and everything. And he goes, "You got the script with you?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." And so he asked me to start reading from the script. And I do. And he says, do it this way. And he goes, "Okay, you'll work out." And I'm like, So, and this was in June of 2010. And in August of 2010, I'm in Hawaii filming Battleship. So I've shared with you my story. But what I want to tell you, it's really the story of many service members. Not the fact that you end up in a Hollywood movie, but really that we overcome and we have an opportunity to overcome. And everybody in the disability community has an opportunity to overcome. Some of us are born with our injuries or our disabilities, and some of them, through the course of life, have to deal with them. It doesn't really matter. The fact is that your character and what you aspire to is what gets you through. What I really want to say to you is that, you know, this life that we have on earth is precious. And we have one chance to do the best we can every day. We have one chance to be the best that we can be every day. And we have an obligation to live up to that for ourselves, for our families, and for our communities. Because we all know, if you don't in this life, that life is going to throw you a challenge or two or three. And are you going to have the character to live up to it? Are you going to have what it takes to deal with that? It's not a question of when. It's not a question of if, it's a matter of when. And we have to take every opportunity of every day to be the best that we can. And serving our nation in uniform or serving our communities out of uniform is part of that chance. And I consider myself truly blessed that I've had a life that's allowed me to try to live up to the best I can be. I know that truly I'm a work in progress. I don't have this all down. I don't have it all down perfectly. But I get up every day trying to be the best I can be. And I think you all You all should be so proud of what you do in your community. But there's more work that can be done. There's greater challenges to overcome. We all deserve dignity and respect. We all deserve dignity and respect, even those in the disability community. Thank you.